And when you come to a conversation, you can hear some people and they're sort of like the flames are burning, right? And you can either take the gasoline and add to the fire with your words. You can say, oh, I agree with that. And you just, and you get more flames burning. Or you can take the water and put out that fire by your gentleness, by your kindness, by the love in your words, and by turning the conversation from negativity to positivity. That's a difficult thing to do. That takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of love. It takes a lot of forethought and a lot of tact to be able to use your words to express love and not to put down.
So there are two avenues for change. The first one is the active force of love.
Mm-hmm.
So this active force of love is you love the person because of who they are. Nothing you do will change it, and if nothing you fail to do will take away from it.
Mm.
And this is God's relationship with us. He loves us so much, regardless of what we do or don't do.
Mm-hmm.
He loves us because of who we are, and we are His children.
And to keep on remembering that your warfare is not against flesh and blood, not against the other person. We're all on the same team. If you're not on the same team, then there's winners and losers. In marriage, there can't be winners and losers. Either you both win or you both lose. Okay? If you think settling the argument is slamming the door and having the last word that way, well, you've lost. And so has your relationship. That's not the way to settle things. The reactive force of blessing is the other two, the second avenue of change. In other words, if you curse me, I will, what? Thank you, Andy. Bless you. The fair exchange in Christianity is blessing for cursing. That's difficult, isn't it? Blessing for cursing. So when someone curses you, someone puts you down and say, oh, you're such a bum, right? You say to yourself, am I a bum? Nope, I'm a child of God. I know who I am, and so I'm not. But what if I was? What if I had been living on the streets, and I was living like a bum, and then I was converted, I was cleaned up, I was in my right mind, and I was living a good life, a clean life for 2 or 3 or 10 years, and then someone said, you're such a bum. That might trigger something inside of me, right? That might say, hey, I wonder if I am. I wonder if I have changed at all. Sometimes the devil wants to get in and say, you never have changed. You just will always be what you have been. And it's not true. That's exactly what the devil tried to do to Jesus. He said, if you are the Son of God. This was a temptation he kept on. This is the greatest thing that we have to fight against, is the wrong identity. The wrong identity. And to understand your identity, you're a child of God because God said so. Because he said so. That's what he said to Jesus when he was baptized. You are my son, my beloved son. I love you and I'm pleased with you. So anyone says something to you, it says the prince of this world came and he found nothing. He found nothing in Jesus because he could not tempt him with these kinds of accusations. So every time he was cursed, he blessed. Right? And he had the active force of love to all people.
James 3 verse 6 reads, the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. So is the tongue among our members, that it defiles the whole body and sets on fire the course of nature, and it is set on fire by hell. Our tongue is so powerful.
We have to be careful, right? So it can produce all of these things. But there is something called sanctification. There is something called forgiveness when we can put things right.
So words can lead to life everlasting, or they can drive towards despair and destruction.
Words can be used to tell the truth, or they can be used to spread deception.
Words can be used to engender confidence, or they can be used to fabricate a scam.
Words can be used to attract, or attack, and they can be used to attract. Did I get it the wrong way? Attract and attack. Okay, you get it.
So why are words so powerful? Psalm 33 verse 6 reads, "By the word of the Lord the heavens were made, and all the host of them by the breath of his mouth."
And the Bible says, so God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them. So because we have been created in the image of God, our words have creative power. Correct? They do. They have creative power on us. They have creative power on others. Look how powerful they are.
Proverbs 18:21, "Death and life are in the power of the tongue."
Death and life. You didn't realize you were that powerful. Very powerful. So we have to really hit the pause button when we think about the words that come out of our mouths. Usually they just come out automatically, and we don't think. But we need to really think and be careful about what comes out of our mouths. So let every man be do what? Swift to hear, slow to speak, and slow to become angry to wrath. For the wrath of man does not produce the righteousness of God.
I like this one because the very first thing is, let every man be swift to hear. How many ears do we have? 2. So let's really listen, and listen with our hearts. And heart, the middle word of heart is ear. Right in there is the word ear. So really listen with your heart, and then be slow to speak, because we only have one mouth. Right? So listening is very important.
That's critical, isn't it? Hitting the pause button. And those words, sometimes when you take off, it's easier, they say, to fly a plane than it is to land. Right? So we take off, but do we land? Right? Just calm down. Just turn the tone down. Calm, right? And just land that plane instead of... And this is something that you'll learn this week if you continue to come, and that is that our secret weapon, we have a secret weapon to know how to land the plane. Because sometimes we take off. How do we land the plane so that we do not destroy the sacred connection that we have with another person? Because you're always juggling things. And life gets kind of, complicated and stressful, and the dreams that you have in your mind, the expectations that you have of life don't turn out the way you dreamed, the way that you expected them to happen. But you're juggling all these balls, and I think of those balls that you're juggling as different things in your life. Microphone went off. There you go. Am I back? There you go. And each of those balls is a rubber ball. If you drop them, they'll kind of bounce back up. So it could be your work, it could be your interests, it could be what kinds of things that you would get involved with. Whatever is in your life that you're interested in, they're kind of like you drop it, it's going to bounce back. Except your relationships. I think of that as a glass ball. A glass ball, a crystal, beautiful ball. And when you're juggling that, you don't juggle it so that you don't catch it. Make sure that you take care of it, because if you drop it, it breaks. And it's really hard to put that back together again. There's going to be cracks in there. So be very careful with your words. There were 3 words that changed my life forever. What do you think those 3 words were? That's right. Those 3 words were, I love you. And who do you think said them? The lady standing next to me, that's right. And it was before we got married. And I hadn't heard those words because I grew up in an orphanage in Saskatchewan. And my parents got a divorce when I was very young. So from the age of 3 until I was 16, I grew up in this orphanage in Indian Head, Saskatchewan. It was called the Orange Home. And it was myself and my 3 brothers, and we're all lemons in the Orange Home, right? So it made us a little sweeter, maybe. I got a lot more sweet when I met my wife. And so she wrote these 3 words on a piece of paper, and we were teaching together in South Africa at a school there. It was a government school, and she wrote on a piece of paper these 3 words, I love you. And I'll tell you what, I was like a dry sponge. Those words to me, I just soaked them in because I hadn't heard them before. It's very hard for me to express that because I wasn't used to hearing that. But when I heard that, it really did melt my heart. It was like, this is serious. This is really important. This is something I was lacking. And we'll tell you a little bit more about that as we go along.
So do the words a married couple speak to each other affect the happiness of their marriage?
Yes, they do.
Absolutely.
So we're going to quote John Gottman here, and we quote him because he's seen as the kind of the top expert, and Gottman and all of his associates on studying marriages, because for over 40 years they have scientifically studied couples and their interactions within what they call the Love Lab in Seattle, in Washington. And so he's seen as the top expert. Why? Well, here's one of the things that he said.
96% of the time you can predict the outcome of a conversation based on the first 3 minutes of a 15-minute interaction. So they looked at couples, and they were monitoring them during a 15-minute conversation, and within the first 3 minutes, they could predict the outcome of their marriage.
So he said, a harsh load of negatively powered words simply dooms you to failure. So that's what he called the startup. The startup. So how do you start your conversations? Those first words that come out of your mouth have to be very carefully crafted. Okay? How do you speak? And when you start, do you start gently? When you start gently, that's going to have the biggest influence. So we're going to do one little explanation or example here before we let you go. And this comes from a book called How Full Is Your Bucket? How Full Is Your Bucket? And the writer's named Tom Rath. He worked for Gallup. And so he had studied in the Gallup polls millions of people. And what he found was this. He said, I like to use an analogy, and it was of a bucket. He said, this is different than the 2 buckets that I talked about earlier. This is just one bucket of water. And he says, imagine that each of you has an invisible bucket. And when your bucket is full, you feel how? You feel great. You feel healthy. You feel strong. You feel confident. You feel like you're capable of tackling anything at work. And when it's empty, you are at your worst, right? So how full is your bucket? Are you feeling at your best or at your worst? So how do you get your bucket full? By the interactions that you have with people, things that people say to you, okay? So you come to camp meeting, and you see someone you haven't seen for a long time, maybe many years, and you've seen them at church many years ago, and then they show up at camp meeting, you show up at camp meeting, and they see you, and they remember your name, and not only that, but they come and they give you a big hug, and they say, where have you been all these years? Is that a positive or a negative? That's a positive. Good. So that's kind of taking their dipper and taking and pouring like a drop of positivity into your bucket. That could be a big drop.
And then they introduce you to a friend of theirs and tell their friend all about you and what an amazing person you were. Is that positive or negative?
Positive. Good.
So
now you
that
got
would
two
be
positives.
another positive. So you got 2 positives.
Right. And then they look at you and they say, so what do you do for a living? And you tell them what you do for a living. And they say, oh.
You do that?
Is that a positive or a negative? That's whoa, that was only like a oh. It depends on the tone of that oh, right? Okay.
But then they say to you, oh, you know what? You were so smart at school when we were studying together, and so you can do anything.
And you must do that very well. Mm-hmm. Okay, is that a positive or negative? But it is a positive, isn't it? Okay. It's a rescue attempt. Okay. But then they finish off with saying,
they say, you were so smart though, you could have been a doctor. What are you doing that for?
That's the definite why. Okay. So how's that conversation going? Yeah, okay. So your positives, your negatives, positives are outweighing the negative 3-1, 3-2 there. So how do you get your bucket full? This is what he says. This is what Ras says. He says, the single best thing that you can do to fill your bucket is to do something for the other person. Right? Isn't that true? The best thing you can do for yourself, that sounds kind of selfish, is to do something for another person. But you're not doing it for that reason. I like this from Steps to Christ. It says, the effort to bless others will react in blessing upon ourselves. Right? And this is where the joy of the Lord is. So we're going to finish off with this from Gottman's study, and that is why marriages succeed or fail. So Gottman studied 700 newlywed couples. This is one of his first studies. And by recording a 15-minute conversations and looking for positive versus negative interactions, they predicted whether couples would be married or divorced within 10 years. And what do you think they found? He was surprised because after 10 years, they found that their predictions were 91% accurate based on a 15-minute conversation. Mm-hmm. That's positive versus negatives. So what was it that they found? That in stable relationships, it turns out that the ratio of positive to negative interactions is 5-1. 5-1.
Those are in stable relationships. So 5 times as many positive interactions to negative ones. And interesting, in a work relationship with your co-workers, it's 3-1.
Yeah.
Not as much as 5-1, but it has to be 3-1 in order for the work relationship to be successful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So negative comments or gestures have a far greater ability to inflict pain and damage on a relationship than words of affirmation or gifts or acts of service do to heal or bring closeness. But in the relationships where the couples are headed towards divorce, the ratio is 0.8-1. Mm-hmm. That means less positive to negative. And that's not a good place to be. So what do you need in relationships? You need, for relationships to feel right, there has to be a very rich climate of affection, humor, and fun, intimacy, and empathy. Mm-hmm. Okay? That big word, fun. That's an important one. Okay, we'll talk a little bit more about that tomorrow. And thank you very much. Take a moment to pray with someone else who is close to you, someone who is here, and then we'll close off with that. Okay? Take a moment to pray.